From Chicago, this is Big Ten Today, presented by Gatorade. Mike Hall and Anthony Herron here with you. And what another great week it was. I feel like this expansion to the 18 teams has really led to like 2 or 3 games every week. We're like, oh, that was interesting. Oh, that was close. Oh, that was really fun.
Yeah, there's a big volume of games, and especially when the teams are playing this well, certainly those towards the top of the conference playing at a really high level, then every single weekend has consequence to it, especially as we get into late October here.
Our pal Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports is joining us, and he's joining us on the road. Where are you, man?
I'm in Annapolis, Maryland, visiting the midshipmen. They're undefeated. So you can see behind me, this is their practice field. You're really missing the good view, though, because in front of me is the Navy waterfront, beautiful sailboats and all that good stuff.
Well, thank you for telling us where the beautiful view is.
I feel like at some point we should have to spin the camera around during the show here. It's a nice tease.
It is a visual medium, Dellinger, but whatever. It's time for our big story here on the show. And the big story is the new #1 team in the land, the Oregon Ducks. This coming after Texas picked up its first loss of the season and opening the door for Oregon. They earned this spot. 2 weeks ago, beat top 5 Ohio State late on Saturday night. Followed up with a short week Friday game on the road where they demolished Purdue, giving up 0 points. Now they're #1. Here's the head coach, Dan Lanning, being asked about their ranking.
You guys were ranked #1 in the AP and the coaches poll. Just what does it mean for you as a leader of this program to bring it back to #1 for the first time since 2012?
Who cares?
How do you have your team not care about the #1 ranking and avoid the discussion and the attention that comes with it?
I think it's really simple for us when our messaging hasn't changed the entire year. You don't sit halfway through a meal and say you're done eating when there's still a lot of food left on the plate. And that's where we're at. We're at the midpoint of the season. We're not done yet. There's a lot of things that we still want to accomplish. So that doesn't really matter for us.
Not a surprising answer. That's what basically...
I don't know. On occasion, like I had a big lasagna last night. I got about halfway through this thing. I was like, ooh,
yeah.
I'm kind of in a good place. I might be getting full.
I was talking less about the food analogy.
Oh.
And more about the saying we don't pay attention to
okay. All right. I'm following now.
We in the media pay attention. It's the first time in 12 years that they've been #1. 9th time all time. Pretty well-earned position right now.
No doubt, man. I mean, not only the results around them, because those are factors that matters when you're trying to rank the different teams and pollsters are voting here and there. Yes, I give the pollsters a hard time in various shows, various platforms here around Big Ten land. But that being said, Oregon's performance itself has earned the #1 spot in the country as well. And it's difficult to count a bunch of teams this season who already started off highly ranked from the preseason, which should only matter so much anyway, but then are playing really well early and have continued to ascend to this point in the year. You're seeing a lot of carnage around college football. You're seeing some squads who maybe have off days here and there. An off day on a short week was them winning 35-0
right.
on the road. I mean, that's the level of football we're seeing right now from the Ducks.
Yeah, it's impressive stuff. Ross, what have you seen so far from Oregon as they now are the #1 team?
Well, in this most recent game, right, they avoided the old trap game, right? Everything, all the ingredients you need for the old trap game were there, right? They were coming off of a huge win, an emotional victory against a top 5 opponent in Ohio State. They had to travel across the country. They're playing kind of a sort of a bottom dwelling team, in Purdue. It was all there Friday night, right? Short week, and they avoided it. Not only that, they got their first shutout on the road in over 30 years, I believe. Incredible playing by the defense, and they did it against a team, by the way, that scored, I think, 49 points the previous week. We do discuss how how struggling it's been for Purdue, but previous week they scored 49 points, and Oregon held them to 0. It's hard to pitch a shutout, Anthony, as you know, and in major college football. And the Ducks found a way to do it in a game that I think a lot of people were circling as look out, the old trap game. They avoided it.
I'll tell you what was interesting, too. All those highlights we just showed was Dylan Gabriel throwing perfection. His passes, I mean, it's no wonder his stats are as incredible as they are. 76% of his passes are completed, every time you look, it's perfectly in the palms of his receivers.
He throws an extremely catchable pass, and yes, he's a lefty. I got a few lefties in my life who I love, who I care for, but lefties can be a bit awkward at times, even as quarterbacks, when the way the ball spins off their hand. But he's got such exceptional playmakers on the outside that doesn't matter. And yes, the spiral is crisp. The touch and loft on the pass when necessary is precise, but he can heat it up and put a few RPMs behind it also when that's required as well. And we've seen him on the move more and more throughout the season. And not only Dillon Gabriel, because he's been exceptional throughout the entire year. He's one of the Heisman frontrunners for very good reason, but he's got playmakers around him, Evan Stewart, Tez Johnson, Jordan James, multiple tight ends. There are a lot of guys playing at a high level, and as much as that O-line struggled early in the season, we're seeing them protecting the QB. We're seeing them moving people in the run game. We're seeing a defense that's amongst the best in America. So the entire team, in addition to one of the best quarterbacks in the country, we're seeing the squad around him ascend.
No sacks allowed the last 4 games. It's amazing to think where we were the first 2 games of the season going, geez, this is dicey. This is not what we're expecting from Oregon. And then ever since, it has been a completely different Ducks team. And that's why they're the #1 team in the country. It's also why we're already getting from The Athletic some projected brackets, which has, not surprising, the Oregon Ducks as a 1 seed. It also has the Buckeyes from the Big Ten making it as a 5. Indiana in, we'll touch on them momentarily, as a 10. And the Penn State Nittany Lions finally making this playoff as the 6 seed right now. Currently, Ross, the Nittany Lions are #3 in the AP rankings. They were off last week. Kind of a doozy of a game coming up this week against Wisconsin. That has the potential to be a great matchup.
It does. Kind of sneaked up, right? Night game, Camp Randall Stadium against a Badgers team that has won, I think, 3 straight, and some really big wins in there too. Most recently, you saw them beat, I think, Northwestern, Rutgers, in Purdue. Now they won those games by combined 117 to 16. What was the score, the combined score? Now, is it a product of the competition or the Badgers for real? We'll certainly find out Saturday night at Camp Randall. That place should be buzzing. They'll be jumping around, and their running back Walker, he's been incredible, right? Lately, he's at a 416 yards on the ground in the last 3 weeks. Tyree Walker, 6 touchdowns as well. So Penn State's going to have to find a way, Anthony, to stop him. And sort of at least slow him, and also to kind of tune out that crowd. It should be rocking.
That's going to be tough duty. And for them on the road, we saw them early in the season being tested in a hostile road environment, able to do that at West Virginia. And they've been at home a lot throughout this portion of the year, but now you're into the thick of conference play. They're coming off a bye week. They handled the West Coast swing as well as any team has so far in their dramatic comeback that they had at the Coliseum against the Trojans. So it's a team that's been tested in a wide variety of ways. We have seen what's probably close to their peak. We have seen that they've been able to manage when games haven't necessarily gone their way for certain stretches. Feels like the bye week came at a really good time for Penn State, though. And so the total body of work that's been there, the schedule they've faced, the way they've been tested in a variety of environments, and multiple phases of the game having to step forward for the Nittany Lions, it's made a huge difference in the way that I think a lot of people perceive Penn State, because you've seen Drew Aller play at an elite level as a passer, not just a quarterback, not just a big, strong-arm guy, but truly as a passer. And now that he's getting more and more in tune with the Andy Kotelnicki system, there's more pre-snap freedom for him to be able to adjust and disguise and decide where the football's going to go. And he's got the ultimate weapon in Tyler Warren to feed the football to step out of the way and let him take the snap from center. There is so much that's there within the Penn State offense, and the playmakers are accentuated in exceptional ways for the Nittany Lions, and we know the talent that's there and available on defense all across that defensive front, NFL players on the back end also. So this is a total and complete football team. They can't have these fits and starts, though, when they're playing the best squads, some that await them on their schedule, perhaps even the way Wisconsin is playing if they face the Badgers this weekend. Penn State has started slow frequently this season. We'll see whether or not they can continue to get away with that.
Yeah, huge second halves, but they've had to because of those slow starts. Yeah. He mentioned Tyree Walker. If you like your TW offensive stars, Tyler Warren, this is the game for you. Remember, Warren coming off 17 receptions the last time that Penn State played, which, again, was not last week. They were off last week. Same thing can be said for the Ohio State Buckeyes, who are also ranked in the top 5. They had an off week after their 1-point loss on the road to the new #1 team in the land, Remember, in that game, they were driving in the closing seconds to kick a potential game-winning field goal. They just barely ran out of time. So that loss, I mean, you really can't get much better of a loss. No matter what team we're talking about the entire season, a 1-point loss going down to the final seconds on the road. How do you think they spent this past week without a game on the schedule?
I'm going to assume they hit each other a little bit. You know, I don't know for sure. I wasn't there in Columbus, but a lot of us have talked about how Ohio State is going to be a bit perturbed when they take the field, get a bit ticked off, if you will, because of the way that game ended, and I understand it. I've been there. When you feel like you were close, when you feel like you didn't quite hit the standard that you've set, then it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And so the Buckeyes have had that bye week to probably run into each other a little bit. Hopefully there was a moment that was found to sort of get away from the game some. But when you've got a roster as deep as Ohio State, even if you are a bit banged up at a few key positions, you can still continue to find ways to be productive, to sharpen your sword, to have iron, sharpen iron, if you will, because there's depth in the roster where you can continue to have guys be competitive and then, yes, allow them to lick some wounds, to get away from things, and then come back to the task at hand. And the schedule will continue to ramp up more and more for the Buckeyes as we move forward in the season here. But every position group, every phase for the Buckeyes can look at it and say, you know what? I think I should be the best player on the field here. I think I should be the most dominant position group every time they step out there, so they can watch the film and look at it and evaluate and say, you know what? That's below the standard we believe we're capable of. And so even though it was just a 1-point loss on the road to the number one team in the country, they look at that and say, you know what? We're capable of more. And that, I believe, will be a driving force for the Buckeyes.
You mentioned their schedule. Still have undefeated Indiana to play. Still have Michigan. Granted, a 3-loss Michigan, but that rivalry, as we know, records are not nearly as important as the fact that there's so much history between those two programs. Ross, what do you think the Buckeyes focused on this past week?
Well, hopefully it was on pass defense, right, Anthony? We saw some struggles there against Oregon, whether that's because of Dillon Gabriel, who Mike obviously said earlier, he's been putting it right on the money. It's funny about Dillon Gabriel. There was a couple of knuckleheads on TV who didn't pick him as their midseason offensive player of the year last week. Can't imagine who those two are. But no anyway, so hopefully the Buckeyes have practiced a little bit, honing in on that pass defense, especially at cornerback. We saw that exploited against Oregon, so you would think that's an area of focus for them. They are playing a true freshman quarterback, right? Dylan Raiola, Nebraska, coming into town, and they're obviously off of a bludgeoning by the Hoosiers, who I'm sure we're about to chat about a little bit. But it's probably a good time for the Buckeyes to get a little break. And hopefully they worked on the secondary and in the back end of their defense that was exploited a bit in Eugene.
I'll tell you what they don't have to work on is the back end of the games. They are outscoring their opponents this season in the second half 129-20. Ross mentioned the fact that Indiana is the next team we're going to touch on. Now, Ross puts out his own list of the top 10 teams in the country. And according to Ross's list, Oregon is indeed still number one. But look at the Hoosiers ahead of BYU, Notre Dame, Iowa State. He has them as the 7th best team in the country right now. Ross, this is what happens when you win 7 straight games by double-digit points.
Yeah, it's incredible. Just an incredible story. Kind of continues to roll on. Indiana, an absolute beating of Nebraska, and it kind of stinks that Curtis Rourke in the process hurt his thumb. He's going to be out. Obviously, the game coming up. And he's been he's putting up Heisman type numbers. But the backup's ready to go. We saw them not just survive against Nebraska in the second half with their backup, but we saw them excel. Right. We saw them continuously score. So no matter what you do, this team seems to continuously score. Can they score 50-plus points without work at quarterback? I don't know. And that's what they've been doing lately. They'll get Washington obviously coming into town. The backup, Taven Jackson, completed 7 of 8 passes. Offense is more than just about one guy, right? Rourke is a big loss, but think about Justice Ellison, at running back and what he's done. They have a plethora of receivers. So for the Hoosiers, they shouldn't lose too much with the quarterback, but certainly it'll be an impact, Anthony.
I mean, 6 straight games now with Justice Ellison with a touchdown. To your point, he's been exceptional. And so many different wide receivers on the outside who make plays. And I agree, Taven Jackson looked great in relief duties throughout most of the second half for the Hoosiers, threw a couple of gorgeous touchdown passes. And there was a true quarterback battle throughout the preseason, the spring, and leading into the fall. And the consistency that Curtis Rourke brought to the table is what led him to winning the starting job, and where, to Ross's point, he has played at a Heisman caliber level. Now, Taven Jackson, for at least one game, steps in. I unfortunately have been in the position where I've ripped fingernails off at different points or had toenails stepped on. It can be very, very uncomfortable, but it was feared to be worse. You know, when you're a quarterback stepping into a pass and one of your fingers ends up bouncing off of a helmet or getting hit while you're in the pocket delivering the football, it can get really dicey. So it's a good thing that it's just a thumbnail. Now, it's very uncomfortable, very painful, but they are expecting that there's a future in the not too distant future where Curtis Rourke returns behind center for the Hoosiers and hopefully picks up right where he left off. We've been talking about teams that come off of performances or come off a bye week a little bit ticked off. I'd say Washington probably suits that as well for their last performance against the Iowa Hawkeyes. Things did not go well. They had been performing like one of the top defenses in the country. Didn't look like that against Iowa. Will Rogers had been protecting the football in an offense with a plethora of weapons. Wasn't looking like that either. So this will be a formidable challenge for the Hoosiers. But the great thing about Indiana, and why I completely agree, Ross, that they are a top 10 team in the country, because defensively, Indiana is phenomenal as well. Bryant Haynes is continuing to be a name that so many folks are mentioning for the work he's doing on that side of the football, what they do within the front seven, the movement, the disguise, the attack, the playmaking ability. They've got a plethora of weapons on offense, but the Hoosiers' defense is sky high with the way they've been playing. And so even if the offense doesn't look as consistently potent as it did previously, this is a defense that will be able to keep them in every single game.
Agreed. The defense is the under-talked about story because, as we've said before, Indiana has scored 40 points a game in previous regimes, multiple different regimes. It's that defense that's been so incredible. But real quick, before we go to a break, how does the offense change this week with the backup quarterback in there? What do you expect to see differently from them?
Well, each guy had to learn a new system, just kind of coming in to figure out how, Kurt Cignetti likes to operate. But for Taven Jackson, he is more mobile between the two. And this is an offense. Like Kurt Cignetti at previous destinations, he's had mobile quarterbacks. He's had guys who are viewed as multidimensional types of talents. Do you add a little bit more movement of the pocket into things with Taven Jackson? He's certainly capable of that. Curtis Rourke, they do it a little bit with him, called pocket movement, but it's not as much. They allow him to stay in the pocket and read the full field. With Taven Jackson, I would say that could be a wrinkle that Washington needs to be aware of, to call the more mobile of the QBs into some pocket movement.
It's just amazing what we're witnessing right now. The entire history of the Indiana program, the most wins they've ever had in a season is 9. And they've got 7 right now, and we're still in the month of October. Hoosier hysteria indeed. This Indiana season, so incredible. 7-0, this is the first time since the 1960s. Their point differential is so good. It's the 3rd best by any Big Ten team through the first 7 games since the year 2000. And they've scored 40 or more in 6 games. That ties a program's single-season record. It is an incredible and unprecedented time to be an Indiana Hoosier. So, for our big interview, we check in with Aiden Fisher, who is an Indiana Hoosier, one of the stars on the defensive side of things. Aiden, thanks so much for joining us. Let me go back a little bit. Describe to me what you remember from the first time you ever met Curt Cignetti.
That was at James Madison. Me and my mom took a visit in the summer. And you tour the campus, you go around with the position coaches, the people that recruit you. Initially, then you get brought into his office. Initially going into it, it's a pretty serious setting. He'll kind of sit there, kind of set like a mood of pretty serious. Let's talk business. Let's talk football. But then he'll talk about the development that he sees for you, the role that he sees you playing in his program. And since then, I was committed to him basically right there on the spot. And it's been great to see those things that he talked about happened in each step that he talked about. It's kind of come true here and continue here in Indiana.
How different is he now versus when you first met him?
He's the same guy. He stays true to a lot of his values. Even look at the practices, the way we approach games. It's the same thing. He knows what he's doing. He's real process oriented, and he kind of just stays about his business all the time.
What's your favorite story to tell about him? Whether it's during a game, out of practice, off the field?
That's definitely my freshman year, special teams guy. We're playing App State at App State. We're down 28-3 at one point. And, most head coaches, they'll start yelling. They'll start getting into their players. You see kind of dysfunction sometimes with deficits like that. He came into the locker room, calm as can be, kind of just talked our way through it. And then, we end up coming back and winning that game. I think that kind of just speaks to his character, and the way he approaches things is he knows there's a process to everything. And even in that game, he told us there's no 25-point touchdown. We're going to have to chip away at this slowly and surely, and we did.
What were the discussions like when you decided to follow him to Indiana?
Initially entering the portal, kind of explored my options. And then, obviously came and took a visit here. And it's just my thinking was, why stop my development and growth in this system, especially with such a great head coach that I knew he was going to come here and he was going to take this program and turn it around quickly. I like to win, so why leave that?
Describe for me, you're in this great spot where you have this big Big Ten city in Bloomington, winning football in a way basically nobody has seen before. What's it like being on campus these days?
It's exciting. Everybody will come up to you and give you good luck or, good game this past weekend. I just think it's a really hungry town that hasn't seen a very successful football program in a lot of years. And, now that they have that, we're selling out crowds for the first time in a while. People want to be a part of this, and I think it's just an exciting time, especially around Bloomington.
Let me talk about some of your teammates now. Curtis Rourke, I know he's injured, but I do want to talk about what you've seen from him so far this season. What has it been like in practice going up against him?
It's been incredible. He makes me better, especially just from a leadership standpoint. He's a great leader for our offense, and it kind of pushes me to be a great leader for our defense. And then the way I kind of see him approach the game, there's a lot of respect for him, and, he's been great so far. And, I'm excited to get him back here soon.
How has he pushed you to be a leader on the defense?
Just being able to see how he does it on the offense. Always uplifting guys, keeping people on task. Just the way he approaches the game with a serious tone and making sure everything's accounted for when he's going into games, that he's always prepared, really pushes me to make sure I'm doing the same.
I mentioned the unfortunate injury to his hand a moment ago, and I know you have Taven Jackson, a perfectly capable backup behind him, but did you let your coach know about your quarterbacking skills? Give him a little reminder?
For some reason, I don't think they would care as much when I was a Wildcat quarterback, but, I'm always here if they need me.
That's right. I'm available, coach. Third, fourth string, I'm here. Your high school skills translate over.
Quarterback.
We were talking earlier in our show about the reason your program has been so impressive. There have been good offenses at Indiana, but this defense is just different from anything we've seen. What do you think has been the thing the defense has done the best thus far?
I'd say the way we play together and play off of each other. Going into the spring, it was a new scheme for a lot of guys. I think that was huge to, have the JMU guys come over and kind of teach this scheme and, get it adapted quickly to the other guys. So being able to gel together and play so well together this quick, especially with, the new scheme like I talked about, it's been huge. And then I think we're really catching our stride now. The back end's playing well. The front seven's playing well. I just think that's the biggest thing is being able to play together and continue to create this continuity with each other.
Well, you mentioned something that I just think is so interesting with this team, which is there were so many of you that came from JMU, and you had your own culture, and you came into a program of players who had their own culture at Indiana. What was it like those first few weeks or months where there was the blending of those multiple worlds?
Definitely not what I expected. Especially with a new head coach bringing his players, you kind of expect a little bit of a rift. You got to earn that respect. And, we did. We did have to earn our respect when we got here. But, the guys that were already here, it's, let's hang out. Let's go get something to eat. Let's go golf. Let's go do something together to kind of build these relationships quick. And then, even talking about it now, the guys that have been here, I think that's what's making us even more successful is the hunger that this school has and the people that have been here to win. When you get used to winning, you can get complacent. But these guys, man, this is a hungry team that just wants to keep winning. And, this feeling and taste of winning is not something they're ready to give up.
Let me give you a chance to talk about some of your teammates. Who on your team is not getting enough attention?
I wish I could name everybody on this team. you know, I'll talk for the defense especially. Jalen Walker is having a phenomenal season. He's playing really well. You know, you look at the front seven. I think Terry Jones and Mari Farrell are playing really well. The corners, Jameer Johnson, D'Angelo Pons, the safeties. Sanguinetti's playing really well. Sean Asbury's playing really well. I can name the whole defense right now, but I just think everybody's really catching their confidence and their stride right now, and what a better time to do it than, you know, facing this back half of the schedule.
Which of the guys are the chatterboxes on the sidelines? Who's talking the most?
I'd have to give that to myself. As you know, once the game's going, I like to get up and, you know, get the team going, get everybody ready to go. And then Mikhail Kamara is one that, you know, he's a really good leader for us. He always has a D-line ready to go. James Carpenter is another one. C.J. West, you know, the D-line really takes initiative because they want to set the tone up front first, and they're very vocal and very communicative of what they do.
Before we let you go, you got the Washington Huskies coming up this weekend. What are your early thoughts on facing them?
You know, we're facing a really good team, a really capable team that will come in here with a chip on their shoulder coming off their last game. You know, they'll be rested up and ready to go off the bye, and we'll make sure that we're there to match that intensity and that energy.
You can see that game right here this Saturday on the Big Ten Network, noon Eastern, 11 Central Time. Aiden Fisher, congratulations on the marvelous start to this season. Thanks so much for giving us a few minutes.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, that head coach is doing some work. They sit here 6-1 on the season. You look at the rest of the way, okay, obviously that's a really tough matchup coming up with #1 Oregon. But after that, Minnesota, Michigan State at home, Rutgers, Northwestern on the road. Ross, that schedule means Illini fans are allowing themselves a chance to dream right now.
Absolutely. An expanded playoff. You know, let's say it doesn't work out this weekend for them at Oregon, right? And they lose, but they win out. It's a 10-2 team with losses to probably 2 playoff teams, right? To Oregon and in Penn State, and on the road at those 2 playoff teams. So I think a 10-2 Illinois is very, very capable of getting in at large berth into the CFP, maybe even hosting a game, being one of the top 8 seeds and actually hosting a game. So very, very doable. By the way, they mentioned on that clip, which was great, but they mentioned the helmets. No, not real leather helmets. Illinois' throwback uniforms were I think the best I have ever seen. Yep. They were phenomenal, sensational throwback uniforms. You know, each helmet was spray painted. It took like 2 hours. Just awesome stuff.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Ross. I was talking to Brett Bielema this morning on Big Ten Radio, and I told him, I've never seen universal acclaim for a uniform or a helmet or anything debut in the way that these Illini throwbacks were universally hailed by everyone. So credit to Bielema, to the equipment staff, to a lot of folks. It was kind of years in the making for that look. And it's just part and parcel to what we've seen this season from Illinois. It's just kind of this program has been building toward this point for several seasons under Brett Bielema, and now they've been able to achieve at a level. And the expanded playoff really suits where they're at as a squad right now, because not only could the schedule put them there, but their performance could put them there as well. They're playing at a high level. Luke Altmaier's playing at an all Big Ten level. They've been able to still continue a run game, even with Caden Fagan having to leave the lineup, and they've found this revelation in Josh McCray, who was a future star in his freshman season. He's been through some injuries, so they found that. And a defense under Aaron Henry in year 2 with him as the DC. Now the Illini defense doing huge things as well. So this is a true test for what they're going to be able to present to the Oregon Ducks. It's just kind of the next hurdle that's along the way here for the Illini. They've already got 3 what were at the time ranked wins, but partly because Illinois defeated the teams, they're not ranked anymore. But now the #1 team in the country awaits the Illini.
And by the way, to backtrack to this Saturday, we were there for Big Ten tailgate. The helmets were cool. The scene was cool. It was the 100-year anniversary of Red Grange. And for Josh Whitman, the AD, and Brett Bielema and Kerry Kenny at the Big Ten office to make sure that Michigan was still going to be there 100 years in one day to the legendary Red Grange game when they've had all these curveballs to the schedule with the addition of teams. I mean, kudos all around. It was a marvelous event that they all put on. I'm really glad for sports fans that it was able to happen. Got some women's basketball news. USC has 2 preseason All-Americans. Juju Watkins, of course, ready to take the throne from Caitlin Clark as the superstar of the sport, but she has a teammate as well, Kiki Iriafen, She is also a preseason All-American. The Trojans are going to be incredible this year. Be ready to see them on national TV all the time. Back to football now. Game Leaders, presented by Gatorade, looks at the top 10 scoring defenses in the country right now. And you see some Big Ten teams are in there, including Ohio State and Penn State, which got our Anthony Herron thinking it's time for a list. Top 5 defenses is this week's Impact 5 from Anthony Herron. Just the Big Ten specifically, 5-1, your best defenses in the league. Start with number 5.
Now, 5, I mean, the list as a whole was really difficult because of the volume of the league and the amount of teams in it. But starting at number 5, Nebraska, who would have been higher on this list even, but they are coming off of a difficult performance, let's call it, against that Indiana offense that we've been raving about throughout the show. But the total body of work for this Cornhuskers defense, especially what they do on the interior of that defensive front. Ty Robinson is built like some kind of a Marvel character for what he's able to do on the inside. The size, the speed, the strength, the tenacity he plays with, and every level for Nebraska has playmakers in it. And from a statistical perspective, they're certainly really good, leading the Big Ten in sacks. And Tony White, one of the better defensive minds in the sport. Cornhuskers have been exceptional for the most part this season. They're going to be very testy when they step back onto the field.
21 sacks on the year. Like you said, nobody in the conference has more than them right now. Your number 4 team resides in State College.
They do, and I love what the Penn State Nittany Lions are doing in the first season that Tom Allen is leading that defense. And yes, it's been, from a pass rush perspective, a bit inconsistent because the talent that's there, the standard that Penn State has the potential to ascend to, isn't there every single week. But man, Denai Dennis Sutton hits the quarterback on a regular basis. Abdul Carter, for a guy playing defensive end for the first time, is phenomenal for what he's able to do in rushing the quarterback. And they're top 5 in points per game, in total defense, in run defense. They get off the field on third down. The pace of play and the way that they swarm to the football on such a consistent basis, it's a defense that you feel when you turn on the film for Penn State on that side of the football.
14 points per game. That's all they're giving up. But they have been so good on third downs. They have the second best opponent third down conversion rate in the conference. The story of the Big Ten this year has been Indiana, and they're your number 3 team.
And frankly, man, I mean, statistically, there's not a defense in the Big Ten this season that's been better statistically than the Indiana Hoosiers. Their defense, I mean, when you look at the rankings for where they're at in points per game, in run defense, in quarterback sacks, you're combining all the different elements of what can make a team excellent on defense. Indiana ranks at or near the top in virtually every category. And they've got playmakers on the interior like C.J. West, Mikal Kamara, who rushes the corner. You just talked to Aiden Fisher a few minutes ago, one of the most productive linebackers in the conference. And they're coordinated at such a high level by Bryant Haynes. They will pillage the village on any given snap. They'll rush the pocket. They will blitz from all different angles. And when they need to lay back, they're capable of doing that and just being position sound as well. So I love so much about what Indiana brings to the table. And so if there is a game, if there is a moment where the offense happens to take a little dip or a bit of a step back, they've got a defense that will keep them in every single contest.
They're best in the Big Ten in rushing defense, too. Right. Now, part of that is because they're getting up on their opponents with their offense scoring, so their opponents have to throw and not run as much. But still, that is not something I think very few people expected them to have the best rushing defense in the Big Ten back when this season started. Your number 2 defense in the Big Ten comes from the number 1 team in the country.
And when you think about the fact that Oregon is able to have a potential Heisman winner as a quarterback leading the way, all those playmakers on offense that we were talking about, but also field a defense that's playing at this level that's actually getting better throughout the season, even with maybe their best player, Jordan Burch, out of the lineup for the time being with an injury. But they still have Derek Harmon, Michigan State transfer, playing at a high level. Mateo Uiagalelei doing big things as a young player off the edge also. They've been banged up at linebacker, and it hasn't necessarily mattered because without Jeffrey Bassa being able to play extensive minutes for chunks of the season here, they've had Bryce Betcher, the baseball star, who leads them in tackles also. So you have so many different areas of Oregon's defense led by Tosh Lupoy that have been doing big things on a consistent basis this season. I gave them the edge on Indiana just because I like the schedule that Oregon has faced. The offenses overall that the Ducks have had to deal with have been more formidable on a more consistent basis, both out of conference and in conference. And so while statistically they're not on par with what we've seen from Indiana's defense, I'm factoring in just the strength of the schedule that Oregon's played, and they've been really impressive throughout the season.
Yeah, they'll get an interesting test against Luke Altmaier and the Fighting Illini coming up this week. Your number one defense in the Big Ten right now goes to...
Start to finish, it has been the Ohio State University Buckeyes. The guys out of Columbus are doing big things, and they've got big playmakers at every spot. And yes, the last time we saw them on the field, they were facing an Oregon offense that is amongst the best in the country. And so the Ducks were able to move the football. The Ducks were able to get the rock into the end zone. It's the one time that a 100-yard rusher has been able to gain that kind of yardage against Ohio State. But when you look at the overall, the total body of work with Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Lathan Ransom, and Denzel Burke on the back end, Caleb Downs at the safety position. They've got guys who've been making big plays in Columbus, who have been absolutely shutting the water off on opponents for the bulk of the season. Yes, there are big tests that await the Ohio State University Buckeyes, but up to this point in the season, there's not a defense in the Big Ten that has been more consistently dominant than what we've seen from Ohio State. And we talked about the attitude that they may come off of that bye week with. I do think we will continue to see a level of fervor, a level of energy that I think suits a team that knows they've got big goals in front of them.
You see the 251 total yards they give up per game. Not only best in the Big Ten, but second best in the country. Ross, what are your thoughts on that top five that Anthony just gave?
No real complaints here. Anthony looks good. It's just amazing if we started in the preseason. If you had told me that would be the top five defense, so the top couple wouldn't be a surprise, right? But the others certainly would be. That we're here talking about Indiana as the number 3 defense in the Big Ten is pretty incredible. We heard from Aiden Fisher there on the team's tackle leader. It's just pretty remarkable that they stand at 7th nationally in total defense. Illinois, would be somebody I would think maybe you were close to putting in that. You look at what Illinois has done. If you just remove that Purdue game, it's a little hiccup that they allowed 49 points. So that kind of brings down all the stats. But in four games this season, the Illini, allowed single digits only defensively. So impressive. What is surprising is that Iowa or Michigan is not on the list. And I know why they're not, but imagine in preseason, right? Had you been told Michigan and Iowa wouldn't be in the top 5 halfway through the year? It's pretty shocking. Crazy year.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, when you look at Iowa's total body of work, they've been impressive, but inconsistent throughout the season. A couple of different games where the passing defense, especially for the Hawkeyes, giving up bigger chunks of yardage. Even the run defense wasn't that impressive against Michigan State last week. So a lot of potential there for Iowa, but it hasn't been that consistent.
Yeah, and there's some other units that have done some great things. Minnesota's got some great defensive stats thus
especially
far.
Against the pass.
But that's Anthony's top 5 defenses right now. Quick thoughts coming up on the matchups to watch for this weekend before we go. You're watching Big Ten Today on the Big Ten Network. Big board here looks at all these games in the Big Ten coming up. 8 contests. Which one are you going to be at, Anthony?
I will be in Iowa City.
There you go. We're gonna.
Where are you going to be?
I will be in Iowa City.
All right, I'm going to see you there.
Tailgate will get you ready Saturday morning. We'll talk about that game in a second. I want to talk about the one we mentioned at the top, Ross, being pretty sneaky. Penn State, Wisconsin. This is a different Badger team the last 3 weeks than we saw earlier in the year.
Absolutely. 3 straight wins. This one did, as we mentioned earlier, kind of sneaks up on you as a pretty significant game, night game. Can't Randall. You know what I'm looking for, Anthony, is Tyler Warren, right? Tight end, do it all, man. What's his encore to that record-breaking performance against USC? He had 17 catches, 224 yards, threw a pass, snapped the ball at center, had a run in there. You can run on Wisconsin. We've seen that on Wisconsin's defense. They're allowing quite a bit of yards on the ground. And Penn State has the ability, right, with Warren, but certainly others, Nick Singleton, Kyron Allen, to run the football. And that's a way to keep the ball, keep possession, take the crowd out of it a little bit. So I'm assuming that will be their what they're focused on this week is trying to get that ground game going against the Badgers.
Yeah, Camp Randall is going to be rocking. There's no doubt about that. Kinnick Stadium is going to be pretty excited as well. Opportunity for Iowa against Northwestern. Very much looking forward to calling that game this Saturday on the Big Ten Network. And while Tyler Warren, I've started calling him the ultimate weapon, Caleb Johnson doesn't do as many different things for the Iowa offense, but they certainly got to reignite that run game that's been stymied a little bit here in recent weeks. And Cade McNamara, I think from Iowa's perspective, he's just got to be accurate early. He has moments in game where you see him in rhythm. Northwestern's defense, though, they pattern match really well on the back end. It's going to be a good matchup.
Cats offense has struggled. Defense has had some really good games
at
various points throughout this season. That'll do it for us. Thanks for watching Big Ten Today.